take you, I hope, to a familiar story this morning, one in Mark. Mark is our oldest gospel. I know it isn't placed that way in the New Testament, but Mark was written before Matthew, Luke, and John. And probably a little shorter, because Mark told the story first. Usually, the shortest version is the first version. Everybody else tends to add on to it. That's what Matthew, and Luke, and John did. So we have from Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He's been raised. He's not here. Look, there's the place they laid him. But go tell the disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Father, we ask for your strength and your guidance this morning. We ask that you would place words in my mouth which would be pleasing to you. We ask that you would sit beside us in these pews so that we might understand the message that you have for each one of us. In Jesus' name, amen. Have I ever told you guys the story? We kind of know each other a little better now after a couple of years. Have I ever told you the story about my first whooping? No. Has anybody here ever got a whooping before? I'm not talking about a spanking. I'm not talking about a whole swat. I'm talking about a little bit of corporal punishment. You know, a little bit of common direction. They used to do that in my, it was more of a direction. It's a direction, I'm going to lead you down this way. It wasn't child abuse, it was direction. This was probably, I'm going to say, 1966. I was 9 years old. I remember that. I remember it very well. Dad was in his first appointment. My dad was a full-time Methodist pastor also. Griffithville, Arkansas was the place, a little white spot in the road in White County, Arkansas. About 150 people. Small school. And summertime came around, nothing much to do except ride bikes. Well, Tim Crotts and David McDonald came by one afternoon to pick me up. Go bike ride. So off we went in a little town of Griffithville. We're riding everywhere, sometimes 3 or 4 times, because there's no place to go. We ended up with one of our places we went to was down by Miss Layrock's house. And Miss Layrock had a baby, and she lived with her father. But we went down by Miss Layrock's house, which was about 2 blocks up and a block over from our house. And wouldn't you know it, on Miss Layrock's road, there was some brand new gravel. It was some of that nice 2.5-inch trap rock, you know what I'm talking about? That blue stuff just fits in a 9-year-old boy's hand just perfectly. So we had to stop and investigate that a little bit. And we're tossing rocks a little bit, me and Tim and David. And then we look up at Miss Layrock's place, and Miss Layrock's got a new roof on her barn. And it's a tin roof. It's a nice, shiny, new tin roof on Miss Layrock's barn. And it's probably, we think it's about 300 or 400 yards away. It's probably about 40 foot. Well, you know what happens when you've got a 9-year-old boy, 3 of them, and you've got nice, new, 2.5-inch trap rock which fits nicely in your hand and a brand new shiny tin roof, don't you know? Somebody says, bet you can't hit that roof. Well, I could. I was the pitcher on the Little League team. So there was a challenge. I picked up a nice rock, fit nicely in the hand, and gave it a fling. Shoot! Landed right smack dab in the middle of that tin roof. Bam, bam, bam! Of course, what we do when we're 9 years old is we duck. We ducked into it. We looked up to see if anybody came out of Miss Laylock's house. Nobody did. Tim says, bet you can't do it again. Oh, yes, we can. Flung another rock. Bam, 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 right in the middle of that tin roof. Ducked down in the ditch. Looked up. Still all clear. David says, I bet you can't do it again. One more time. Flung the rock. Bam, bam, bam. Ducked down in the ditch. Miss Laylock throws open that back door. She's got a baby on one hip and she's got a broomstick in the other. And she says, you boys stop throwing rocks at my roof. And of course off we went. And we rode bikes for the rest of the day. All afternoon. Forgot completely about Miss Laylock's house. Came back home. Flung open the front door. Ready for my supper. And who should be sitting in my dad's seat on the couch in my living room but Miss Laylock and that baby. Soon after that, I experienced my first whooping. And to my parents' credit, and to mine, I suppose, it was my last whooping. That was a significant event in my life. Those rocks, those stones that find their way into our lives can have significant consequences. And I remember that 2.5-inch trap rock very, very well. Rocks and stones, they're all around us in our history. They're all around us in our culture, in our everyday lives. And they've been with us all throughout the ages. You got, just think about it. You got Stonewall Jackson, you got Stonehenge, you got natural stone, you got soapstone, Rosetta Stone, kidney stones, gallstones, headstones, Stone Temple Pilots, Rolling Stone, Gathered Stone Moss, and of course from 1972, The Temptations, Potholes and Rolling Stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. When he died, all he left us was alone. Star searching. Seems that stones have played a pretty significant role in the history of Christianity from almost the beginning of time as we know it too. From the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments are written by God's own hand on the stone tablets delivered by Moses to the people of Israel. In Exodus, if you'll remember, the people are dying of thirst. God sends them water through a stone. Prophet Elijah uses stones to build an altar to God. Solomon uses stones to build the temple to worship God. Boy David used a smooth river stone to wallop Goliath upside his head. Then in the New Testament, Jesus asked those who condemned the adulteress to cast the first stone if they were sinless. The stoning of Stephen, that's the impetus which God used to spread Christianity throughout the world, pretty much. Matthew tells us that Jesus changed Simon's name to Peter, which means rock, because he would build his church on that stone. In Revelation, Jesus promises to those who overcome a white stone with a new name written on it, the name of the victor. And in the psalm which we used this morning as our call to worship, the psalmist describes the stone that the builders rejected as the chief cornerstone, referring to Jesus as the foundation of our faith. But there is no other stone of more importance to us on Easter than the one we encountered this morning at the tomb of Jesus. And this was no small stone. As described in Mark's various translations, this stone was very large or exceedingly great. It was a big sucker. This was a big stone. It had been placed into the entrance of the borrowed tomb, a tomb which itself was chiseled out of one solid piece of stone. The body of Jesus was placed inside this one-room stone coffin to ensure that there was no other way in, no other way to access the tomb, and especially no way out. The priests and the Pharisees, they were pretty worried though. They were still worried that his disciples might try to steal the body of Jesus. and start rumors that he had risen from the dead. So, because it was carved out of a solid stone, there was no underground passage to this tomb. There was no secret back wall. The only way in or out was by rolling away this massive stone at the tomb's entrance. And even then, at the urging of the priests and the Pharisees, Pontius Pilate sent some soldiers to make sure the tomb was secure by sealing the stone, probably with the great seal of the Sanhedrin, something similar to that yellow police tape that we see sealing a crime scene. These precautions were made, of course, to keep grave robbers out, not to keep grave risers in. There was really nothing anybody could do about that. There was really nothing that could be done about that. The precautions made in securing the tomb with this massive stone, they were of little consequence to Jesus. In fact, he was probably out of this stone tomb before it was even sealed, anticipating the arrival of Mary Magdalene and the other Mary and Salome. They've been worried about who's going to roll away the stone when they got there. This massive stone, so that they could serve their fallen Savior one last time. But it had already been done. Writer and preacher Max Lucado has a vivid retelling of what it must have been like for these women to encounter that angel at the tomb. He imagines this angel just kind of sitting on top of that big rock, maybe whistling a tune, his legs dangling, swinging back and forth, biding his time until these ladies show up. Because the stone had already been rolled away. Not to let Jesus out. He was already out. The stone had been rolled away to let everybody else in. That big old stone has been an obstacle to what the Easter story is all about. The empty tomb. The story which has at its center the promise of Jesus' victory over death. The story which proves that no stone enclosure, including a stone sepulchre of death, can hold the love and the grace and the compassion that Jesus Christ has for us. That no stone is big enough to come between us and God. Which takes us back then to our text. Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? What stones are coming between us and the risen Christ? What obstacles or stumbling blocks stand in our way to the entrance to the tomb? Is it the pebble of pride which is stuck in your shoe, slowing you down? Maybe we've got that big old rock of greed standing in our way that we just can't seem to get around. Is there a boulder of a grudge or hate or resentment that we seem to pick up and take with us everywhere? Maybe it's time to get rid of these stones. The little ones that dirty up our hands and wear on us bit by bit, and the big ones that block our way to the loving arms of the risen Christ. The answer to the question of who will roll away the stone for us is pretty obvious. Jesus is the one who has already rolled it away. We just keep picking it up, putting it back in our pockets, and carrying it around with us. Maybe it's time to get rid of it once and for all. And I wouldn't advise throwing it at Mrs. Layrock's tin roof. We've got to give these stones to Jesus, our risen Savior. He can easily roll away those stones of sin if we allow Him to do so. On this Easter Sunday, let's join Jesus on the other side of that rolling stone. Thanks be to God. Let us pray.